Hello, everybody. I am the Reginald Jones Fellow at the Indianapolis Recorder, and today I have the pleasure of having with me Miss Eunice Trotter, who is the Director of the Black Heritage Preservation at Indiana Landmarks, and Reverend Ajabu, community member, leader, activist, teacher, and everything else in between.
Yeah, founding.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Founding member of the Veterans Association for African Descendants.
Oh, and thank you for that. The founding member of the Veterans Association. Yeah, I have a long family, a long history with military servicemen. So thank you for your service and thank you for putting that together.
It was a pleasure.
Good. So today we are going to talk about Emmett Till. Over the weekend, the Indiana Landmarks held a documentary. Um, um, you showed the documentary Till and brought in the director of that documentary and a relative of Emmett Till and Mamie Till. And so, Ms. Trotter, can you just speak to why it is important for Indiana Landmarks, the Black Heritage Preservation to do that type of work and bring those types of documentaries to the Indianapolis community?
Well, this showing of the Till-Mobley was a joint affair between the Veterans Association of African Descent and the Black Heritage Preservation Program of Indiana Landmarks. And my role as director of the Black Heritage Program is to document, preserve, and share Black heritage. And as we know, the Till event, that massacre of that teenager, was a catalyst for the civil rights movement. As I did some research of that case prior to the time that we had the event last Saturday, it appeared in the Recorder as headlines every week for more than a month.
Mm-hmm.
So this was an important story, not just for Mississippi, but for the entire country, including Indianapolis, Indiana. So it was critical that we remember this history and also that we see it from a Black perspective. That is my goal, to make sure that we share our heritage and history from an African American perspective, period. So
Yeah.
this was a great example of what my goals are.
Thank you for bringing up the archives, because when I did the research, I noticed that too. Like, oh my God, that this story in 1955 was on the forefront of what we were doing here. And it was on the forefront of everybody's mind, not just in Indianapolis, not just
Oh no,
in Money, Mississippi, not just in Sumner, right? It was on the forefront of everybody's mind. And I think
it
that's what,
was it was
yeah,
it was international.
it was.
Yeah, it was international. It just wasn't in America, a press, that this story was told. It was all over the world.
Yeah, I think too, that's one of the questions that I have posed a little bit later, but I'm going to ask now because I think it's timely, is that that this whole thought process of Mamie's language in the movie and period was how her son was lynched. And recently, the United States passed that the Emmett Till, they named it Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, which was passed in 2022. But just like Emmett Till, that public lynching of George Floyd was an international, right, thing.
Yeah.
And that we saw that everywhere, and it bound us together as a community of allies. We knew who our allies were, and we wanted to push and fight with that thought process. And now with this resurgence, I don't necessarily know that it's a resurgence, but maybe just a recycled history that we see these things continually over time. Like it seems like what happened to Emmett Till also happened to George Floyd, could happen to somebody else. Like, what is this thought process of having history repeat itself and Black history being historically accurate, right? Like
The problem with the repetition of the history is we don't often know our history, so we allow it to be repetitive. I would imagine that most Black folks don't know a Black man was lynched on Washington Street, downtown Indianapolis, nor do we know that about the lynching on the Circle, nor do we know about a lot of other violent deaths of African American people here at the hands of mobs. And these incidents weren't done quietly or secretly. These were done publicly. And just through my own research, I have learned that often these incidents were done at the hands of the highest authorities in these communities, people who were associated with the police departments or with political offices and other leadership roles. So, these were warning to Black people to stay in your place. We are the law. And that resonates on a DNA level almost. And so today they continue. They might not be taking place on the State House steps or in the courthouse, right, but these incidents are taking place in public spaces all over the country.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. It's man, I appreciate the history lesson, right? And I appreciate the thought process of bringing up the people who have been lynched in Indiana. The most famous image of lynching is right here in Indiana, Marion, Indiana, but right here in Indiana, of Thomas Shipp, Abram Smith and Thomas Shipp. And I think sometimes people forget that they had to make a law to publicly say that you will no longer send images of lynching in the mail, right? Like they used, like that had to become a law. And when you think about
profited.
How,
they profited from that, those images. And another lynching that we don't know very much about is the lynching that occurred in Mount Vernon, Indiana, where in one day 7 Black men were lynched in public in downtown Mount Vernon. And a young woman, a young high school student, uncovered that history just recently, and has a monument to those 7 men, 7 who were lynched in one day in Mount Vernon, Indiana, which is in the southern part of the state. Yeah. So, and this happened in the 20th century. This didn't happen in the 1800s. Yeah. So it is still in the memory of people and their descendants in that community to this day. Yeah, that's interesting. I will going to have to do some more research in regards to that that specific one, but it's interesting to, it's not even, I guess that's kind of the trauma that goes along with having to live with that, is that in my mind, I know that it'll happen again. And that's kind of crazy in the thought process, right? Yeah. It can happen.
If I can jump in there.
Please.
See, as a military man, when we go on a mission, after the mission, we have what we call an AAR. I like to call it a AAA. They call it an after action report. I like to call it an after action analysis. And they look at what we done good, and we look at what we could do better. And when you're talking about our struggle as a people, we don't do that analysis. And so we keep doing the same thing, getting the same results, and then talk about, well, why does that keep happening? Well, you're doing the same thing. And if you do the analysis of our history and understanding when Emmett Till's lynching launched the civil rights struggle, you can see where Martin Luther King and that entourage of other organizations that work with him, they said that if we were able to get the right to vote, which we didn't have it at that time, then we could vote, change the people that's in the system, and then we would get better results or a more humane result out of the system. They accomplished that. We got the right to vote. We voted. We changed the personnel. And instead of the change in personnel, changing the system changed the personnel. So now, because we didn't do the after action analysis, when you're talking about Emmett Till, we still have modern day lynchings with George Floyd and a bunch of other people because we're still trying to solve that problem using something that shows that it don't solve it. Putting a person into, and I'm not against voting, but I am against using that as the solution to stopping our lynching when history bears clear witness that it don't stop it. So we have to come up with different strategies in order to stop that, because I'm sick and tired of it.
That's an interesting concept. That's an interesting thought process, because in the movie itself, what Keith was able to show was Mamie's decision making, right? And I think that was a different perspective that I had seen, because I've seen several Till films, but from that standpoint, in regards to her decision making, in regards to her being to ask to make a political decision, because that was a political decision in the time of her grieving, right? The NAACP wanted her to make a political decision and wanted her to stand up in that thought process in the midst of her grieving. And I think sometimes we as women, especially Black women, have to make these far-reaching and expansive decisions in spaces when we really should be thinking about ourselves. We have to think about a collective, right? And it's okay, right? Like that has been what it is that we have been doing for the betterment of our people and the betterment of a culture. But in that thought process, not only did she make that decision to do that politically, she did stand her ground in regards to making sure that her son was sent back to Illinois, and making sure that it was an open casket, which is another, monumental decision to help us see what was happening in Mississippi about Black people. But another thing that I think that needs to be brought up in regards to these political moves is the analysis is necessary, but also the game changes every time we win, right? So it'd be a different story if we didn't go out to vote, change the people, and then we win, and then instrumental change happens. But then as soon as we do that, they change the voting rules. They purge us from the
game is the game is dynamic.
Yeah,
it's not sitting still. So if you're using what you thought was going to work in 1955 and trying to do that in 2023, you behind the curve. One of the poignant, to get to your point about Mamie making decisions political decisions during her grief, one of the poignant scenes of that movie is when Emmett Till's aunt came to the funeral, and she said, I can't look at it. I can't view that. I try to stop it. I feel guilty. And Mamie says, you got to. You got to look at it, because she understood that if you looked at it, and the reason why she opened the casket is because she wanted to have the shocking impact that it had, so people would have the mindset, so it would generate the mindset that we got to do something about this. Yeah. And again, the leaders at that point, the people that was determining the direction on how we was going to do something about it, they decided that getting us the right to vote and voting was the solution. Now we have the benefit of being in the future and looking back at that, and we can see that it didn't stop it. There was some progress made, and even when you look at the situation that just happened today, that Biden is talking about having a monument for Mamie and Emmett. That's good, but it's not stopping it. And what will stop it, maybe, is to hold the people accountable within the system that dropped the ball. You had the justice system do an investigation of two men of that murder, and the two men that done it admitted to doing it. The woman that helped them to do it is still alive, and the Justice Department done an investigation that said that there was no evidence to hold anybody accountable. What the? You also had a district attorney in Mississippi to hold a grand jury to nullify what a grand jury does, which the grand jury that indicted J.W. Milan and Roy Bryant and Carolyn Bryant, that was a grand jury that indicted them. Now you got a clown who looks like you and me, who is the benefit of the strategy of Martin King and SNCC and NAACP and the plethora of others. He gets in there and convenes a grand jury that he comes out and concludes that nullifies what the grand jury done in 1955. And the grand jury cannot nullify what a grand jury did. Okay. That's fraud. Yeah. So now, if we're talking about doing the after action analysis, even though that woman has died and was not held accountable for the part that she played in the lynching of that 14-year-old child, those people that let them get away with it, the system, those people that are in the system, the sheriff's department, and now the DA, they need to be held accountable. So when you talk about the sites that Joe Biden is talking about honoring, the church in Robert's Temple in Chicago, where Emmett Till's body was laid to rest, the courthouse that exonerated those murderers, and the spot in the Tallahatchie River where Emmett Till's body was supposedly found, that's all good. But how do you not honor and memorialize his grave? Yeah. What made those sites important was his remains.
I agree that I think you bring up some very valid points, and I agree to that thought process in regards to monuments and are not enough, right? Like they're not enough to warrant our vote. It's not enough for us to say that they have done something to help with the fight and or the progress of where it is that we need to be. And I think that is a conversation that we should have in a deeper conversation, because it's so much to unpack there, right? It is so much to unpack in a thought process of what that looks like. One of the things though that happened, go ahead. I want to kind of shift a little bit.
Yeah. Ultimately, Mamie had that casket open so people could see what happened to her only child.
That's right.
In a quest for justice. And just because the last person that was indicted has died doesn't mean that justice died with it.
I agree.
The system failed. And so we need to hold the people that are in the system that failed when they exonerated two people who admitted to the murder. We know they had the murder, and the system exonerated them. Let them go. Let them say, yeah,
I agree.
We're going to let them get away with the murder.
Yeah.
So the systems can still be held accountable because it didn't do what it was supposed to do, and that's where we need to be putting our emphasis and call for President Biden to use his bully pulpit to call for the release of the grand jury transcript, so that we know how did you come up with a no bill? And the people didn't admit it. And the woman that helped them to carry out the lynching was still living at the point at that time. How did you go through a investigative process or a grand jury process and you came up with not holding anybody accountable? That sounds fraudulent. The transparency.
We agree. We agree that there needs to be some
transcript.
And I like the thought process of having an actual deliverable of releasing the transcript, right? So I do appreciate that thought process, and thank you for that. One of the things that I saw on Saturday that I really enjoyed was the presence of armed guards, right? The armed guards for the people who were present, for us who were watching, and for the information that you were bringing. And I appreciated the fact that, for me as a Black woman, I appreciated seeing women being in protector warrior modes, right? And I saw that when you had, after the movie was over, Mamie Till's relative Priscilla Sterling, excuse me, and Keith Bonchamp, who directed the movie,
actually, he wrote and produced it. He wrote and produced it. He corrected me on that because it gets him into different politics. If he says he produced it, because then the sister that produced it, hey, you stealing my thunder, and so he corrected me on that. And so if I can share with you his correction, writer and producer.
Writer and producer, not director.
Yes, he did not do any directing.
Writer and producer. So they were on the stage. They were protected by an armed guard, and the facility was protected by an armed guard. Why did that happen? And you know what? Maybe it happens all the time, but maybe that was the first time that I saw it. So can we explain a little bit about that?
Go ahead, Eunice.
Well, Indiana Landmarks provides its own security. However, that security did not go far enough in the eyes of our co-sponsors, and just in the eyes of history, to have that level of security provided for our guests who have been under threat previously. So we allowed a private security firm to have African American people provide the security for the speakers. We are up south. This is Indiana. That's just the bottom line. Mississippi is not, a far shot from Indiana's culture and politics. So we felt that we needed that additional security to assure that our guests, both on the stage and in the audience, were safe. As we all know, there's all kind of crazy stuff going on all over the country, where crazy people come in with weapons. Indiana Landmarks culture does not allow for people to be body searched or scanned with, a metal detector or any of that. So this level of security was really important and significant. We had a great event. It was peaceful. The security firm that provided that security was professional, male and female, African American. And so it was a good thing. And I think probably if we looked for protecting ourselves more in that fashion, there'd probably be fewer George Floyd incidents.
I totally agree with that last comment. And I totally agree with that because not only did I feel safe and I felt the people felt safe, but I felt like the security team itself knew the difference between mental illness and an actual threat, right? Like there was a person who had mental illness and, we verbalized it, we saw it, right? And the security were not threatened and scared and shaky and lose, or shoot someone in the thought process because of this person who was dealing with mental illness. And I think there's something to be said about that in regards to us as a people, in regards to our wherewithal of knowing what is going to harm us and what is not going to harm us, and being able to subdue threats as opposed to being afraid. And it was just a beautiful thing to see. And I love the fact that they were Black, right? I didn't even mention that at first. I just mentioned that I saw the difference between a female armed guard and not normally seeing that. But I love the fact that they were Black and that they knew their role and they knew their job, and they could do what they came to do and still have empathy for the people who were there. And I think that was, it was amazing to see. Did you want to add
I mean,
to
it's well, yeah, I do. You know, it was kind of ironic because that person who had mental illness physically struck a couple of people. And then I look at the Whitfields who were there on behalf of their son who had mental illness, who was murdered by police making a call to their home. He was murdered in front of his parents. And there was not that reaction. Security could have seen that young man who has mental illness at the Indiana Landmark Center as a threat and could have, strong-armed him and drug him out and all this craziness. But no, you're right. They didn't. They saw this as mental illness. They saw this man as a low risk, not a threat, and everything went along peacefully.
It was great.
Now, see, if I may, we saw him as a threat. Because he hit me. You understand what I'm saying? But our response to that threat was not to kill him.
Oh,
right.
Great point. Great point.
You understand what I'm saying? That's the response. That's the response that we get from the police. But we talked to his handler. You understand? And you need to keep him in check because he told him it's all right for you because he was busting himself upside the head. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. He says, all right, if you want to beat somebody, beat your own head, but don't keep your hands to yourself. You understand what I'm saying?
That's brilliant. The point that you just made is brilliant, that he was a threat, but we know the difference, right?
But see, the threat did not make us afraid. The threat, you understand, we evaluated and we understood that we had to keep our eye on it, and we were ready to move him out if he attacked somebody.
Yeah.
But he did not develop to that. You understand what I'm saying? So because we were not afraid of him, we were armed, we didn't have to shoot him.
Right.
In fact, we didn't even have to step to him. We stepped to his handler and say, man, make sure that you keep him in check. You understand what I'm saying? Because we didn't want any disruption of the goals that we were trying to accomplish with the viewing of the movie. And we got through that. You understand what I'm saying? Now, I'm going to have, actually tomorrow, a conversation with his handler to say, do not bring people like that to our events in the future.
Who cannot handle the actual the curriculum or what is being presented, and who cannot be in a place with that many new people, right?
Well, no, see, when we went to the reception, the handler brought him.
Wait. Before we go deep into that thought process, I want to cover two more things in the time that we have, and I don't necessarily know that is kind of the direction I want to go. I think the point that you made in regards to there was a threat, but we know what has to happen within the thought process. It doesn't bring fear is exactly what we needed to get.
You don't have to kill a threat. You can address a threat.
Right.
And if you're comfortable with yourself, you're not afraid to the degree that you got to kill an unarmed, mentally ill person.
Right.
You understand
well,
what I'm saying?
That's because you guys did not see him as that significant of a threat as Black men are seen by police.
Right.
Or, willing, but you didn't see him at the level of a threat that we are typically viewed.
That's a good
Even
point,
if we were dealing with someone with mental illness, as was the case with Mr. Whitfield, he was seen as a threat. That's the reason lethal force was used, even though his behaviors were just, not much different than the erratic behavior of the young man who was at the event.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought up the Whitfields too, because there's work to be done still in our own in our own hometown and regarding that. Two more questions in regards to what happened on Saturday, Till as a whole. We are going through this just a real expansive fight as it relates to education, historically accurate history. How do you think Till should be unfurled in the school systems, or should it be, and should it be taught, and should we keep should we look to someone else to educate our children, or should we return to that thought process of educating ourselves?
Go ahead,
We
Eunice.
most definitely have to. We have to educate our own kids. You know, having the upbringing that I had, my parents always looked to our own people to educate us about us. So, and I think we should take that same position. And this is something that we've done historically. It wasn't until school desegregation that we began to lose that desire, that interest, you know, in educating our own children. I remember at my church when I was growing up back in the 60s, we had Black history classes at my church.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is our responsibility to educate our children. We cannot leave that up to the school system, to the government, to the politicians, to anyone except ourselves, period.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, well said. This is my final question: is what do we want to see for the future? What is happening in the future of the landmarks, and what do you want, Reverend Ajabu, in regards to what we need to do in Indiana? How can I be an ally? You know, what's next?
Well, for Indiana landmarks, we are working all over the state to uncover, document, and preserve Black heritage. We have such a rich history in this state that few people really even know the depth of that history here. We want to incorporate that history into the so-called mainstream historical narrative. So what's next is to continue to recognize these significant places all over the state. We had over 100 Black communities in this state prior to the Civil War. You know, I just talked to a woman today in Hope, Indiana, that's near Columbus, who has a 132-acre farm, which is the site of a Black Moorish temple that has been there since the early 1900s. Wow. I mean, and I can continue to go on and on about that history. We must document our history. And that documentation starts with our individual families. Every single family has Black history and heritage. You got to write it down, because in the future, it's going to be more and more difficult to uncover and to document and to record. Our kids can't write cursive anymore. That means they won't be able to read documents, historical documents. Newspapers don't publish obituaries unless you pay $300, $400, $500, $600, $700. That means that won't be a source. Census information is totally inaccurate now for the 2020 census, and I could go on and on about the importance of doing this work right now. This generation right now has to do the work, or I think we're going to lose it forever.
Very good. I love that idea of indexing our own history. We have to do that.
Yes, we do.
As for VAAD, we are going to continue to work with Keith Beauchamp and Priscilla. In fact, Priscilla is having a press conference Thursday concerning this development out of the White House. So we're working with her on that. But we were made aware by Keith that the Till-Mobley actually has a curriculum. And so he has shared that with myself, you know, and so we are going to get together and actually start doing workshops using the Till-Mobley and scenes from the Till-Mobley as a point of departure, so that we can start educating our children about what happened, what's happening, and what we need to happen in order to stop it.
Yeah.
The way the play, see, you are a bona fide teacher. We definitely could use your expertise to sit down and talk about age appropriateness. How and one sister said she don't deal with age. She deals with how far advanced they are. Say it again.
Intellect.
Well,
Yeah.
well, how far advanced they are. You understand what I'm
Right,
saying?
right,
So
right.
she says, because you might have a 5-year-old operating at a 7-year-old's level. You understand what I'm
That's
saying? Or
yeah,
you might have a 7-year-old operating at a 5-year-old's level.
right.
So you got to be appropriate on their development. And
Yeah.
so we would love to bring you into that discussion so
Yeah.
that when we launch that, it has the potential of having the greatest impact that it can have, and we start teaching ourselves instead of doing this stuff that they're doing in Florida and here too, quiet as kept. You understand what I'm saying? The words that they given the narrative talking about that them people of African descent, they benefited from slavery.
Yeah,
Get
we're
out
not
of
gonna do that. Yeah, we're
here.
not gonna do that. And
Get
definitely,
out of here. You understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
So we got to definitely start teaching ourselves, and we see your skill set as being very instrumental in getting that done.
I can definitely help differentiate, and I would love to do that. And we know that what is happening in Florida, they're not telling who are the true beneficiaries of slavery and the long beneficiaries.
Not by a long shot.
Not
Not
by
by
a
a
long
long
shot,
shot.
right?
Let
So
me say one more thing. Eunice has said that we possibly can do that at Indiana landmarks. You understand what I'm saying? So the camaraderie, the organization, the working together has not stopped with the
I want
movie.
to say,
It
I
actually
want to say
begun.
this. I'm sorry. I want to say this. We have been holding monthly history classes at Indiana Landmarks all year. Now, this coming Thursday at 6 o'clock, Mr. Conley's going to be there, and he's going to be talking about how Black folks moved to Indiana, the migration patterns of Black people from the South and other parts of the country to Indiana. So we've been doing these history classes. We've got to teach our own people our own history. And
yeah,
all of the speakers have been African American, and we're going to continue doing that throughout the rest of the year. So this Thursday at Indiana Landmark at 6 o'clock, we're doing this in conjunction with Freetown Village.
okay.
So these classes have been going on. So I hope your listeners on the podcast, and then your readers in the Indianapolis Recorder will come out and support these kind of events.
Very good. We'll definitely make sure that they know that that's coming up this Thursday. I'll post it. And we're going to pause here for part one. And then tomorrow on the podcast, we'll have Priscilla and Dan Wakefield and possibly Keith in regards to our continued conversation in regard to Emmett Till. So thank you so very much for being here. Go ahead. You want to say something else?
No, just thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Brother Ajabu, for being here. Thank you for being present. And I'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.